The year was 2006, and if you were anyone important in the business world, you had a BlackBerry clipped to your belt. Research in Motion's revolutionary device wasn't just a phone. It was a status symbol, a productivity powerhouse, and quite literally, an addiction for millions of professionals worldwide. The company held an iron grip on the smartphone market with a staggering 43% market share by early 2007, processing over 10 billion messages daily through their proprietary BlackBerry Enterprise server. Fortune 500 executives, government officials, and Wall Street traders all shared the same compulsive behavior, constantly checking their BlackBerry for that next email, earning them the nickname Crackberry Addicts. The device's physical QWERTY keyboard made typing emails lightning fast, while its military-grade encryption made it the only smartphone trusted by the Pentagon and federal agencies. BlackBerry wasn't just dominating the smartphone space. They essentially created it, growing from a small Canadian company to a global empire worth over $80 billion at its peak. President Obama famously fought to keep his BlackBerry when entering the White House, calling it his lifeline to the outside world. This was BlackBerry's kingdom, and Research in Motion's co-CEOs Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie ruled it with absolute confidence. They had built the perfect business tool, and corporate America couldn't get enough. But empires built on yesterday's innovation have a habit of crumbling when tomorrow arrives, and tomorrow was about to walk onto a stage in Cupertino, California. January 9th, 2007. Steve Jobs walked onto the Moscone Center stage wearing his signature black turtleneck and jeans, about to deliver what would become the most industry-destroying product launch in modern history. The iPhone wasn't just another smartphone. It was a complete reimagining of what a mobile device could be. While BlackBerry users squinted at tiny screens and pecked away at physical keyboards, Jobs demonstrated a gorgeous 3.5-inch touchscreen that responded to finger gestures like magic. The iPhone could browse the real internet, not the stripped-down mobile web that BlackBerry offered. It played music like an iPod, took decent photos, and most revolutionary of all, it made email just one app among many rather than the primary function. Jobs showed the audience how you could check stocks, get weather updates, find locations on Google Maps, and browse YouTube videos, all with smooth, intuitive finger swipes and taps. The presentation lasted 90 minutes, but it took less than 10 for anyone paying attention to realize that every existing smartphone had just become obsolete overnight. The iPhone's multi-touch interface eliminated the need for a physical keyboard, stylus, or trackball. You controlled everything with natural finger movements. Most damning for BlackBerry, Jobs demonstrated how easy it was to set up email accounts without requiring corporate IT departments to install special servers. The iPhone was consumer technology that happened to do business tasks brilliantly, while BlackBerry was business technology that barely functioned as a consumer device. The initial response from BlackBerry's leadership was a masterclass in corporate denial and arrogance that would be studied in business schools for decades. Mike Lazaridis, Research in Motion's co-CEO and the engineering genius behind BlackBerry's success, watched Jobs' presentation and dismissed the iPhone as an expensive toy that would never appeal to serious business users. In internal meetings, Lazaridis pointed out that the iPhone's battery would drain quickly with all those features running. The touchscreen would be impossible to type on accurately, and enterprise customers would never accept a device without physical keys. Jim Balsillie, RIM's other co-CEO, was even more dismissive, telling reporters that the iPhone was just a niche product for consumers who wanted to waste time watching videos instead of being productive. The BlackBerry leadership team convinced themselves that their existing customer base was locked in. Corporate IT departments had invested millions in BlackBerry Enterprise servers, and switching would be costly and complicated. They believed their encryption technology and email efficiency gave them an unassailable competitive moat. Research in Motion's stock actually rose in the months following the iPhone announcement, as investors shared management's confidence that business users would stick with the proven BlackBerry platform. The company continued developing devices with tiny screens, physical keyboards, and the same email-centric interface that had made them successful. They were fighting tomorrow's war with yesterday's weapons, convinced that their fortress was impregnable even as the enemy had already invented the cannon. But while BlackBerry's executives were dismissing the iPhone as a consumer gadget, something unexpected was happening in corporate boardrooms across America. The same executives who had been BlackBerry's most loyal customers were getting their hands on iPhones and discovering that business didn't have to be boring. The iPhone's larger, brighter screen made reading emails and documents actually pleasant instead of a squinting exercise. The Safari browser could display full websites, allowing users to access web-based business applications that were impossible to use on BlackBerry's primitive browser. Most importantly, the iPhone introduced the concept of apps, third-party software that could extend the device's functionality infinitely. By July 2008, Apple launched the App Store with over 500 applications, including business tools, productivity suites, and specialized industry software. BlackBerry's platform was closed and controlled entirely by Research in Motion, while the iPhone became an open ecosystem where developers could create solutions for every conceivable business need. Corporate executives started carrying two devices. Their company issued BlackBerry for email and a personal iPhone for everything else. This dual-device behavior was a warning sign that BlackBerry's leadership failed to recognize. When your customers are voluntarily carrying a competing product alongside yours, your monopoly is already broken. The iPhone wasn't just matching BlackBerry's email capabilities, it was making email feel like an antiquated form of communication compared to text messaging, social media, and instant access to cloud-based information. The numbers tell the story of BlackBerry's collapse with brutal clarity. In 2007, Research in Motion controlled 43% of the smartphone market and seemed unstoppable. By 2010, just 3 years after the iPhone launch, BlackBerry's market share had plummeted to 24%, while Apple had captured 24%, and Google's Android platform was rapidly gaining ground. The trend lines were devastating. BlackBerry was hemorrhaging users, while iPhone sales exploded from practically zero to over 40 million devices annually. Even more damaging was the shift in user demographics. The iPhone was attracting the same high-income professional users who had been BlackBerry's core constituency. Business executives who once viewed their BlackBerry as an essential tool were switching to iPhones and discovering they didn't miss the physical keyboard as much as they thought they would. The iPhone's autocorrect and predictive text made touchscreen typing surprisingly efficient, while the larger screen made reading and navigating exponentially more pleasant. Research. In Motion's revenue growth slowed to a crawl as customers delayed BlackBerry upgrades while waiting to see if the company could respond to Apple's challenge. The writing was on the wall, but that writing was being displayed on bright, colorful touchscreens instead of BlackBerry's dim utilitarian displays. By 2011, BlackBerry's market share had collapsed to 11%, and the company was in full panic mode. They had gone from market dominance to also-ran status in less than 4 years, watching helplessly as the industry they had created moved beyond them. BlackBerry's attempts to respond to the iPhone threat revealed a company paralyzed by its own success and unable to adapt to a changing market. Research in Motion's first touchscreen device, the BlackBerry Storm, launched in November 2008 and was an unmitigated disaster that actually accelerated customer defections to iPhone. The Storm featured a clickable touchscreen that physically moved when pressed, creating a typing experience that combined the worst aspects of physical and virtual keyboards. The device was plagued with software bugs, laggy performance, and a confusing interface that tried to bolt touchscreen features onto BlackBerry's outdated operating system. Reviews were scathing, with technology journalists describing the Storm as feeling like it was designed by people who had never actually used a touchscreen device. Even more damaging, the Storm's failure highlighted how far behind BlackBerry had fallen in software development. While Apple was creating intuitive, responsive interfaces with smooth animations and logical user flows, BlackBerry was still thinking like a hardware company trying to cram new features into old architectures. The company's engineering culture, which had been perfect for creating efficient email devices, was completely unprepared for the consumer-focused, software-driven world that the iPhone had created. Research in Motion spent the next several years releasing devices that felt like desperate attempts to copy iPhone features without understanding why those features were appealing. The BlackBerry Torch, Playbook tablet, and a series of increasingly irrelevant smartphones all failed to gain traction in a market that had moved beyond them. The final nail in BlackBerry's coffin came from an unexpected direction: the enterprise customers they thought they owned forever. As iPhone and Android devices became more capable and secure, corporate IT departments began facing irresistible pressure from employees who wanted to use their personal smartphones for work. This bring-your-own-device trend was driven by executives who had discovered that iPhones were actually better business tools than BlackBerries for most tasks. Apple responded by dramatically improving iOS security features and creating enterprise management tools that made it possible for companies to support iPhones without compromising their security requirements. Meanwhile, Google's Android platform was being adopted by multiple manufacturers, creating a diverse ecosystem of devices that could meet different corporate needs while sharing a common, modern operating system. BlackBerry's exclusive control over their hardware and software, which had once been a competitive advantage, became a liability in a world where flexibility and choice mattered more than tight integration. By 2012, even the most conservative corporate IT departments were supporting iPhones and Android devices, eliminating BlackBerry's last stronghold. The company that had once processed 10 billion messages daily was watching those messages migrate to competing platforms that offered more features, better user experiences, and greater flexibility. Research in Motion's stock price, which had peaked at over $230 per share in 2008, collapsed to less than $10 by 2012. The company was forced to lay off thousands of employees, close offices, and desperately search for buyers or partners who might be interested in their remaining intellectual property. The BlackBerry collapse wasn't just a business failure. It was a case study in how quickly technological disruption can destroy seemingly invincible companies. Research in Motion's mistake wasn't technical incompetence or poor execution, but rather a fundamental misunderstanding of how markets evolve and customer needs change. They built the perfect device for 2003 and spent the next decade trying to incrementally improve it instead of reimagining what mobile communication could become. BlackBerry's leadership viewed smartphones as business tools that happened to make phone calls, while Apple envisioned mobile computers that happened to send emails. This philosophical difference determined everything from hardware design to software priorities to marketing strategies. BlackBerry optimized for email efficiency and battery life, while iPhone optimized for user experience and functionality breadth. BlackBerry treated apps as unnecessary distractions from productivity, while Apple made apps the centerpiece of their platform strategy. Most critically, BlackBerry designed devices for IT departments to approve and deploy, while Apple designed devices for individual users to love and demand. The iPhone succeeded because it made technology feel magical and personal rather than utilitarian and corporate. Research in Motion never understood that the smartphone market was evolving from a B2B industry serving corporate customers into a B2C industry serving individual users who happened to work for companies. By the time they recognized this shift, it was far too late to change course. The company formally changed its name from Research in Motion to BlackBerry Limited in 2013. But rebranding couldn't solve the fundamental problem that their products had become irrelevant in a post-iPhone world. Today, BlackBerry exists primarily as a software and services company, having abandoned smartphone manufacturing entirely in 2016. Their market share, which once peaked at over 50% globally, rounds to zero in most quarterly reports. The brand that once defined mobile productivity has become a cautionary tale about the dangers of complacency and the speed of technological change. Former BlackBerry executives now give speeches about innovation and disruption, warning other companies not to make the same mistakes they did. But the lessons from BlackBerry's destruction go beyond simple warnings about staying innovative. They reveal how completely an industry can transform in just a few years when the right catalyst appears. The iPhone didn't just create a better email device or a more convenient phone. It created an entirely new category of personal computing that made previous smartphones look primitive by comparison. BlackBerry's engineering excellence, loyal customer base, and dominant market position provided no protection against a competitor that changed the rules of the game entirely. The physical keyboards that BlackBerry users once considered essential became obsolete when touchscreens proved more versatile and space-efficient. The email focus that had driven BlackBerry's success became a limitation when customers wanted devices that could handle any digital task seamlessly. The enterprise security and control that had been BlackBerry's key differentiator became commoditized when Apple and Google developed their own secure, manageable platforms. In just 3 years, from 2007 to 2010, the iPhone transformed BlackBerry from the undisputed smartphone king into a struggling company desperately trying to remain relevant. The kingdom fell not through conquest, but through obsolescence, the cruelest fate that can befall any technology company. The BlackBerry story stands as perhaps the most dramatic example of industry killshot in the modern era, demonstrating how innovation can destroy established companies faster than ever before in human history. Research in Motion had everything going for them: technical expertise, financial resources, loyal customers, and years of market leadership. But they also had something that proved fatal: the absolute certainty that they understood their market better than anyone else. This confidence blinded them to the possibility that the market itself might change, that business users might want devices that were also personal and entertaining, and that the future of mobile communication might be about much more than just email. Steve Jobs and Apple didn't beat BlackBerry by building a better BlackBerry. They made BlackBerry's entire approach to smartphones irrelevant by showing the world what mobile devices could really do. The iPhone killed BlackBerry not through superior execution of the same vision, but through a completely different vision that made the old one obsolete. In the end, BlackBerry's smartphone kingdom fell because they built walls to protect yesterday's innovation while Apple was already living in tomorrow's world. The lesson for every industry leader is clear: your biggest competitive advantage can become your greatest vulnerability the moment someone changes the game entirely. BlackBerry learned this lesson too late, and their former kingdom now belongs to companies that understood the future better than they understood the past.